Bastards. Today, in this part of Nuclear Disaster Series, we're going to talk about nuclear weapons. This this thing, nuclear weapons warfare alone could be like 5 videos long, but I'm going to keep it as simple and short as possible because you can go through a book this thick about nuclear warfare. So, nuclear warfare. Is it feasible? Is it possible that it will happen? To be honest, since the discovery of nuclear weapons, it's always possible. Sometimes higher, like during the Cold War, there were two instances where nuclear weapons were almost used at a point that it was a matter of hours. Like I would suggest to look this all up. There was a submarine that was being chased by American destroyers, and two of the three commanders of the submarine voted against using nuclear weapons. So that was a very close call. The next close call was when the Russians brought wanted to transport nuclear weapon installations to Cuba during the height of the Cold War, and at the very last moment, a matter of hours, the um the Russians pulled their vessels back from the American blockade around Cuba. So it was because, it's because of the level-headedness of some people that a nuclear disaster, nuclear warfare could be avoided. Another instance, actually, now that I think of it, was when a certain Soviet commander was was head of the radar installation, and they saw very strange dots on the radar. They thought it was nuclear missiles that were coming their way, but it turned out to be later on. It turned out to be just solar flare activity. But if that commander at that moment just like did not think and just did his job by informing that there were nuclear weapons coming, World War III would have been broken out. So, because of the level-headedness of one man, we were all saved from Armageddon, to say. Just to show you how close these things could happen. Why would that be very dangerous? Because of the Mrd Doctrine, which means for Mutilated Assured Destruction. That is a military doctrine that says it was used during the Cold War and actually not even today, which means it was especially to America and the Soviet Union, and it meant that every party with nuclear weapons have the capability to retaliate when the other party uses nuclear weapons. So, because of submarines, missile silos, transportable missiles on railroads and trucks, and hidden places where they could build these installations, these were all part of the retaliation capability. So it means that if one uses the nuclear weapons, the other will throw back, and both parties will be destroyed. And that's the reason why nuclear weapons were never used in such a warfare. Nuclear weapons have been used two times. Two bombs that were thrown in 1945 on Nagasaki and Hiroshima in Japan during the Second World War. And that's, I hope, the last time we will ever use these kind of weapons. And it's from those records that we learned a lot of the effects and what happens when a population gets hit by nuclear weapons. So, let's say nuclear weapons, if one goes off, I would say first, prevention. If there are heightened tensions between countries, let's really remember the countries that have nuclear weapons: United States, the Russian Federation, China, India, Pakistan, Israel, North Korea, France, and England. Those are the main lands that have nuclear weapons, official, by the way. So, if there are heightened tensions between those countries, and that will result in warfare, in a conflict with two countries that have nuclear weapons, like Pakistan and India, those are very close calls in the last few years. The problem, you have to know when when is the time to leave a certain area. Because I would advise to always, as a prevention, to know, is my area a target for possible nuclear attack? Well, just look it up on a map and try to, or Google Maps or whatever kind of maps you have, try to look for where do you live and where are the these are the most, the targets that would likely be targeted by nuclear weapons. High civilian populations like big cities, capitals, such. Second is industrial centra, like an area that is mainly focused on industrialization, factories, production, especially when it's production of military weapons and perhaps food and other technological things that could help in the effort of the war. Those are also highly valuable targets. And the next thing are military installation. And so if there are airfields, nuclear base, army bases in your neighborhood, they will probably be targeted, especially as if they are big or especially technological equipped for such warfare. All right. So during tensions, I would advise to evacuate to a quiet area like the rural areas, or just perhaps even to a friend, family who lives. At least send your children out there. So if there is ever a nuclear explosion, they will survive at least. Just a little tip. All right. Stay always on the news because. Yeah, if there's a threat of nuclear warfare, in my opinion, I don't think the governments of the world will have neither the will nor the time to alert their citizens. Why? Main reason is how do I say this? They do not want to create a panic and a chaos, because when one people knows about incoming missile, they will try to alert their family and friends, and they will alert their family and friends, and so on and so on. And you have a getting chain reaction of a panic in the general population, and that will make it harder for military and government officials to go on with their contingency plans, the evacuation procedures, because they already have this all figured out. I would advise to read a book, Castle Rock. It's a book about how the American government plans to evacuate high military and government officials. How would they do it? Where would they go? And how do the procedures work? And so on and so on. So I would advise to read that book. It's very enlightening and interesting. So they do not want to create panic. That's the first thing that could happen. And they will only tell on the last minute when their things are ready. The second thing that could happen is your government will alert, because some countries are highly prioritizing their civilians. Switzerland has a mandatory bunker for every 10 civilians in their country. By example, Sweden is also one of those countries. So if you're living in one of those countries, that civilians will be warned at hand if something gets on the radar. This once happens in Hawaii, where they have some sort of a warning system for the whole population, sirens, cell phones, and so on. And there was once an incident. They do one of those, how do you say this, annual exercises just to see if the systems work and function. But one time they forgot to warn that it was an exercise. So for 38 minutes, all the population in Hawaii thought there were nuclear missiles going on, and we can learn something from this, from the panic, like I said before. Several people headed in full panic at home, and they had car accidents, and some people even died because of those things. Some people just had heart attacks because of the fear. I'm not sure about this, but I think even there were suicides to not want to be burned alive with that fear. So that way you can see how panic in a population could work and even lead to deaths before the nuclear attack. So be very careful about those warning systems. Always keep cool. All right. So now we are at the part from when you're outside, at work, at home, whatever. A nuclear weapon strikes and you did not hear it through the radio, social media, internet, government warning systems, and so on and so on. You're surprised. How does a nuclear attack look like? There are actually three ways nuclear weapons are being used. Actually, I would say four. Actually, yes, four. Sorry. If we're talking, the most likely thing I think that would happen is a dirty bomb. What is this? A dirty bomb is a radiological weapon, and this is just a conventional explosive which is surrounded with nuclear materials like nuclear waste or nuclear materials that are used in certain appliances and medical apparatus. So a terrorist organization, a sect, or somebody else who has a high hate for other people, I guess, they could put just an explosive in a high populated area, and they could surround it with nuclear materials, let it go off, and the nuclear material will be spread around the area, which is not as deadly as a nuclear weapon, but it's more high likely, less, and it's more possible, I think. Yeah, so that area will be contaminated for a very long time and not be inhabitable, but it's especially the psychological part that will be the most damaging of a dirty bomb, aka a radiological bomb. So there's a most high possible. So if you live in a city and there is threat of a rise of terrorism and such, that's something you need to look out for. Right. The next thing, a nuclear weapon, I will go from high to low. There is a way to use nuclear weapons as a EMP weapon. And how do they do that? About 30 kilometers above the Earth's surface, if you explode a nuclear weapon, it will cause an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, which can, if the bomb explodes in a certain angle, it can, how do you say this, destroy the circuits, electrical lines, chips. It can fry all those electrical systems because of the EMP over a very large area, especially when they hit transformers, power plants, and such and so on, so on. So almost the half of a country could be without electricity because of a weapon that is used in such a way. So I would advise to, if there is such a threat, build a Faraday cage, keep it ready to keep your appliance in. I have made a video on how to build a Faraday cage, but most likely I would suggest to have some alternative ways to do your daily work, because when all the electricity is down, it could take months, perhaps even years to repair it all before it's back on the level before. So try to find manual tools to do your daily work, like your washing machine. Try to find an alternative way to heat your house with a wood stove or something, and so on. Have candles and lanterns, oil lamps ready for bringing light in the darkness, and so on. Yeah. Oh yeah, the wood stove for cooking, of course. The second way, nuclear bomb, and this is the most destructive way actually, is above the surface, which means if this is a surface, town, city, when a nuclear bomb explodes above the surface, like they did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, because the bomb was dropped with a parachute, so it would explode at a certain height. When the bomb explodes, then the bomb has more areas it can hit with their how do you say this, with the 3 levels. I will talk about the 3 levels of danger zones, but the most initial heat of the nuclear weapon can hit more surface of the area, and there will be a more shockwave, and more buildings, people will be destroyed and killed that way. So the plus side of this kind of weapon is, because it explodes above the surface, there is less chance that the nuclear weapon will take, how do I say this, dirt, soot, materials, into the atmosphere, so there will be less residues that will be contaminated with radioactive particles that will drop down. There will be drop down of nuclear fallout, of course, but less than the next thing I will say, which is a surface nuclear explosion. If you have just the surface and explodes on impact on the surface of the Earth, and it could explode, it will only hit a certain area because it's like a grenade, like with the grenades video I made. A grenade, when it explodes, it will do more damage around than on the sides. So when when the area is surrounded with landmarks, buildings, some hills, mountains, big buildings, trenches, the energy will be less spread and will do less damage in the surrounding areas of the explosion. But even though it does less structural damage, there is the danger of more nuclear materials will be spread around the area during the fallout, because when it explodes on the surface, the heat will drag everything with the ground with them. So dirt, dust, smoke, there will be more of it being flown into the atmosphere, and those particles that are heavier will eventually fall down and are contaminated with radioactivity, which can spread more radioactivity around the area and over a larger area, and will be dragged more in the atmosphere, where the wind will drag it even further. So that's the more dangerous part of that. So there's there are good sides and bad sides, but always a bad side, of course. You're right. The types of nuclear weapons. There are a lot of types of nuclear weapons. There are tactical nuclear weapons, which have a small yield. There are neutron bombs, which have more gamma rays, which is more deadly for everything that has live tissue, because it can penetrate through buildings and thicker materials and will kill living cells. So that has less structural damage, but will kill more living things. And beta is between those two, and alpha is, of course, the least dangerous. But it's dangerous when you inhale it, when you eat it, when you get it inside of a wound that will penetrate your skin. You can get radioactivity burn from it. So look it all up, those information, because it's a whole area which is too long to explain in this video. And now we are at the part to know what to do when the nuclear weapons goes off. Imagine you're just walking to your work. Perhaps you're walking with that special little lady of yours, and you see some rockets in the distance. That's the first thing that you need to be warned of. Be aware of your surroundings, even especially when there are threats of nuclear warfare. When you see not a plane flying slow, but something that goes fast, turn away from it. Turn away from it and act like, how do I say this? Try to cover most of your body. Put your hood on, your sleeves down, lay down away from where you see the rocket or the explosion. Lay down, cover your ears, open your mouth. It's just like how to survive a grenade explosion, because first thing, the first danger of a nuclear explosion is the flash. Everybody thinks that they can look at the nuclear explosion with their bare eyes. No. Every person within a certain range that looks at the nuclear explosion, their eyes will be blind, because the flash is so much light, and even if you're closer, the initial heat can even melt or evaporate the moisture in your eyes and on your skin. But if you're not within that zone, even the light can blind you, even if it's temporarily, because it's so bright that, like I said, it can blind you, and you cannot prepare for it. The moment it goes off, close your eyes and throw yourself on the ground and cover your ears, open your mouth, because it will be followed by a shot. I'm not really consistent with this, but you have the flash. you see the flash, close your eyes, try to cover as much hood on, and throw yourself on the ground, make yourself small as possible, because even the same flash can be that bright that it will give you burning wounds. If you're even close enough, it can even burn your whole skin. If you're even close enough, you will just evaporate. In Hiroshima, they are shadow people, like they call them. Those were people who stood too very close to the nuclear explosion, and they just evaporated whole. And the light was so bright that their shadows were burned onto the walls of buildings because of that little moment that they stood in the way, and there was less burning where the shadow were. So you can see in Hiroshima and Nagasaki where the people were sitting or doing their daily things, and their image are projected onto those walls and buildings because of the initial heat and the bright light of that. So that's something to think about. Like I said, the flash starts, close eyes, jump, cover as much up, look for cover behind a wall, in a ditch, the closest thing, because a few seconds later it will be followed by a shockwave. So if there is no cover, like no building to just go around the corner, no ditch to lie in, even if it's a small one, or something else behind a car, whatever. If there is nothing like that, you're in the open, lay down, cover your eyes, open your mouth, because the shockwave can damage your lungs if you keep your mouth closed, so that could be very dangerous. Cover your ears, because the explosion will be so loud that your eardrums will just pop like that, and you don't want to be deaf in the aftermath of a nuclear explosion. Because the shockwave can be very devastating. Try to hide behind very strong structures like buildings or something, or I would not suggest to go inside of a tunnel, because the tunnel could collapse or something. Don't go inside of a building, because yet again the building could collapse also. It depends on where you are, when the bomb goes off. You got to be lucky, to be honest, because you only have a few seconds to react. So let's say you survived the flash, you were far enough that you were not evaporated, or you weren't, you don't have dirt or second degree burnings, because you stood luckily behind a building, behind a wall, you threw yourself in the ditch or a trench or something, or behind the car. So you survived the flash, the heat. So the shockwave has destroyed many buildings around you, broken all the glass in the wide area, even the furthest away. That's something to also be careful about if you're around the building. Even if you're outside of the shockwave zone, the biggest shockwave zone, glass could still splinter and fall on you or fly in your face, which happened also a lot in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So lay low so the glass won't hit you that hard, and try to make yourself as small as possible. So you survive those things. To be honest, to talk about the flash again, if you have something just as small as a blanket, your sleeves off, your hoodie on, perhaps you want to protect your children by throwing yourself onto them, because the flash, like I said with the shadow people, even that small amount of cover could make the temperature less, so that it's perhaps manageable to say, but you gotta be very lucky on the position where you stand when it goes off, like I said. So you survived the flash, the blast, the shockwave, which is more like it's like an earthquake almost. So you're standing up, you just realized what happened. You see that the typical mushroom cloud popping up in the distance, and then what do you do? There's two things you can do if you especially live close by. I would say the closer you are, try to evacuate as fast as possible. Doesn't matter. I would say doesn't matter if you have gear at home. Just try to get the hell out of there as fast as possible, especially when there is a when there is the mushroom cloud and the wind blows into that direction. You must run and evacuate in the direction of the wind then, because if the wind goes your way, try to evacuate sideways to get out of the path where the nuclear particles and contamination and the fallout will be blown towards to. Try to cover, like I said, with the in the part of how to bug out in a nuclear disaster. Try to cover as much of your body, your inhalements, cover your mouth with, even if it's cloth. You don't want to breathe in that stuff. You don't want to get those things falling off onto you. Evacuate as fast and far as possible. Yeah, it will be very nasty to say. So let's say you're lucky. You have time enough because the wind blows that way. You're far away enough from the nuclear explosion. There are two things you can do. Like I said, evacuate as far as possible because you do not want to be near it, or you can bug in. If your home is is okay outside of the danger zones, perhaps you have to bug in, and that's way you can help already if you have a basement or some fallout shelter. We're gonna talk about fallout shelters in the next video, which probably will be the last part. But if you have to bug in, follow the like yet again the bug in video on how to react when a nuclear disaster happens. The same thing is for a nuclear weapon. If you live far enough, always evacuate first. Perhaps it's a judgment thing. There is no certain thing you can do. It depends where you live, what the situation is, what kind of nuclear weapon, what country you are. Are you living in a city, rural? Those are all factors you have to judge by yourself, to be honest. I cannot tell that for you. I have no clear way to say step 1 is this, step 2 is this. It's all your own judgment. I'm here just to give you ideas on how to do based on experience from other people and military manuals who have tested this stuff. So, bug in, because you have to bug in immediately, because after a nuclear explosion there is a certain phenomenon which happens but is not talked about a lot, and that is black rain. Like I said, the stuff, the materials that are blown into the sky and will be falling down as fallout. Close by a nuclear explosion, there is a certain phenomenon that happens, and that is when the first materials start to mix with water particles in the sky and the clouds, and those particles will start to fall down very fast, and it will come down in black drops, which happened in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. People noticed after the nuclear explosion they were starting to see black rain. Those raindrops are very radioactive, so try to look for cover till the black rain is stopped. So bug in for at least a moment then, or try to at least cover yourself with something that like a plastic sheet at least, that can prevent that those black drops will fall onto your skin, into your eyes, into your mouth. You don't want those alpha particles and beta particles inside of you, so try to cover yourself as most as possible. Yeah, so after that you can evacuate perhaps, or bug in. Follow the instructions from my video, how to bug in, how to evacuate, the bug out part. Yeah, there's not much to say, to think about this. I would also advise to, those are in other videos, like you cannot only eat canned food, you cannot drink water that is contaminated and they were laying in outside sources. Yeah, it's something you need to think about when doing this. Yeah, then there is the problem of radioactive sickness. If you, in the aftermath, during the bugging or the evacuation, start to get the next symptoms, you probably have radioactive sickness, and you will need to seek medical attention, to be honest. You should always have have a medical check after a nuclear disaster. But I'm going to read now the signs of radioactive sickness, which are the next: the loss of appetite, feeling tired, headache, diarrhea, nausea, vomiting, throat infection, burning wounds on the skin, bleedings, internal and outside bleeding, hair loss, bleeding gum, and bleeding from the mouth, the throat, the nose. Those are all, if you experience these after a nuclear disaster, you probably have some radioactive sickness, which can depend on the degree in how deadly it is. I would suggest to look it up, because it's not a certain, oh, it's just a cough kind of diagnosis. It's a spectrum of diagnosis which can tell what kind of medical treatment you need, and how prioritized you will be. The same thing for your partner and children, of course. Yeah, I know it is perhaps a very quick glance on the nuclear warfare, but to be honest, I don't think even the most power hungry people in the world are stupid enough to use nuclear weapons. They will know what there is at stake, and yet again, like I said, the Mrd Doctrine, they can lose as much as they would gain with nuclear weapons. So that's the thing I hope the humanity always think about when trying to decide to push that button. Let's hope it will never happen. Look information up in military manuals, civilian manuals, civilian defense manuals, yes. Biographies from people who survived the bombing in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, the tests from the United States and France. They even used their own soldiers as test subjects to see what happens if they are close by or enter a radioactive zone after the blast. Look all those information up, because it's very detailed. It's kind of how do I say this? Difficult to sometimes understand, because there are thousand things to take in account when you read about this stuff, which is the reason why I'm not talking about this, because it's a very small video. It would be a very long series of videos only about nuclear warfare. So I think I'm ready with this part. I hope it gave you some ideas, you learned something from it. Subscribe, leave a reaction, leave a like, reaction and such, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you for watching, and I hope you will never have to suffer the same fate that people from Nagasaki and Hiroshima would have suffered. When somebody says we should just throw a nuclear bomb at somebody, tell that person to read on the biographies of people who survived this thing, because it's very horrible. It's caused many suffering. It will destroy lands for centuries, for human life to yet again exist over there, because the ground will be contaminated. There will be no there cannot be farming, agricultural. You cannot eat the animals, the plants on it. You cannot live there without genetic diseases, miscarriages, and cancers and such. The aftermath is very dirty, and not to mention the wounded, people who are half melted, who have radioactive sickness, which is a very painful and long way to die, in a slow way to die. It's very horrible. If you read up on this stuff and see images of it, I would suggest to just never try to advocate for nuclear weapons, is what I'm trying to say. So thank you for watching. The next part will be about fallout shelters for when you want to bug in after a nuclear weapon goes off. Thank you for watching. Bye.